At my mom's memorial, Dad handed my sister the entire art gallery, then turned to me and gave me an envelope with nothing but an old train ticket. Have you ever been handed an old train ticket at a supposed memorial for your own mother, while your father proudly declared your younger sister the new light of the family's vision, and your sister publicly mocked you? My blood still runs cold remembering that moment of betrayal. What would you do if your family treated you like background noise, stole your art, and made it clear you were utterly disposable? I packed up, disappeared, and built something real on my own. But it turns out their chaos still had a way of finding me again. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name's Josephine Moran. I'm 26 and I work part-time restoring old paintings for a small studio downtown. Nothing fancy. I mostly clean dust, fix frames, and patch cracks in artwork other people forgot about. I used to think that was poetic. My family doesn't see it that way. I didn't even get back to that work until much later. Back then I was just trying to keep the lights on. We were a name in the local art world. My mom was the real deal, a painter people actually respected. My dad, Victor Marin, ran her gallery like a business instead of a passion. My sister A is 5 years younger. She paints too, but in that glossy, Instagram-perfect way that sells fast. Dad eats that up. He always called her our prodigy. Mom passed away last winter, and Dad decided to host a memorial show for her. He called it a celebration of legacy. I didn't want to go, but my aunt said, "Your mom would have wanted you there." So I went. The gallery looked nothing like it used to. It used to smell like oil paint and wood varnish. That night, it smelled like expensive perfume and catered food. Every wall had a photo of Mom smiling beside EA or Dad. Not one picture of her painting. Most people there hadn't even met her. I recognized maybe 5 faces. I brought one of Mom's old canvases that I'd spent months restoring. It was one of her last unfinished works. Soft colors still smelled like her studio. I carried it in carefully, thinking maybe they'd want to include it in the show. The guy at the front desk gave me a blank look and said, "Mr. Marin said everything's already curated." Mr. Marin being my dad. Inside he was standing near the main piece, a huge portrait of Mom, one EA had repainted from an old photograph. Flashbulbs went off every few seconds. He waved when he saw me but didn't come over. It did a quick air kiss on my cheek, then turned to a group behind her and said, "This is my sister, Josephine, the quiet one, the observer." They laughed like that was charming. I stood near the back. People were drinking, talking, taking photos beside Mom's art like it was a prop. I caught pieces of their conversations. Her color palette was visionary. They say EA is going to continue the brand. It wasn't about grief. It was marketing. Then Dad got up to speak. He stood under a spotlight like he was accepting an award. He said, "Tonight we celebrate not just an artist, but the birth of a legacy carried on by her daughter, the new light of our family's vision." Applause. Cameras. A smiled like she'd been rehearsing it. Then he gestured vaguely toward the crowd and said, "And of course our daughter Josephine, the observer. Every family needs one. Keeps us grounded." A couple of people chuckled. After that, he made a show of pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside were the keys to the gallery. He handed them to Ye and kissed her on the forehead. "Our home," he said proudly. "Yours to lead." Then he turned toward me, smiling in that fake, thoughtful way he has when he's about to embarrass someone. He pulled out an envelope. "For you," he said. "A reminder that freedom has value too. You always wanted your independence, daughter." Inside was an old train ticket. Yellowed. The ink faded. No explanation. I held it up, thinking maybe there was some meaning I wasn't catching. A leaned into the microphone. "Try not to lose your only ride," she joked. People laughed. I heard my dad laugh too. That was it. That was the moment I decided I was done. I slipped the ticket back into the envelope, tucked it into my jacket pocket and started walking out. My shoes echoed against the marble floor. I leaned Mom's restored canvas against a column, faced toward the wall so the lights wouldn't catch it. I left it there on purpose. Behind me Dad's voice rose, sharp and annoyed. "Don't make this about you, Josephine." I didn't look back. Outside the rain was coming down steady. I pulled the envelope from my pocket again. The ticket was still inside. A one-way trip, dated from years ago. The destination name had bled away from age. Just a time and a seat number left. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe he thought he was teaching me some lesson about not expecting anything. Either way, I didn't want to hear another lecture about humility or earning my way. I started walking toward the station. My clothes were soaked before I reached the corner, but it didn't matter. I didn't have a plan or bags or even my own art. I just walked. The gallery lights behind me got smaller with every block. On the way, I cut through my building, shoved a few things into a beat-up duffel and kept moving. The farther I went, the quieter it got. No cameras, no speeches, no EA performing for attention. Just rain and the sound of my shoes. At the station, I looked down at the ticket again. The date was old, but the time matched the next outgoing train. I handed it to the ticket clerk. He frowned at the date. Old issue, unpunched. It still counts as an open fare. I can reissue it for the next train. He printed a fresh stub and slid it under the glass. I nodded, stepped onto the platform and waited. The train arrived with a low hum. A wash of warm air rolled across the tracks, soft against the cold. I stepped inside, sat near the window, and watched my reflection disappear as the train started moving. I didn't know where it was going. Didn't really care. All I knew was I was finally out. The train dropped me off in a city that smelled like rust and rain. The air was thick and gray, the kind that clings to your clothes. I got off with one duffel bag and no idea what came next. I just walked until I found a sign that said, "Rooms for rent." The place was a basement apartment behind a laundromat. The walls sweated moisture. The ceiling was low enough to hit my head if I stretched. The landlord, a man named Bill with a cigarette always hanging from his mouth, looked me up and down and said, "$200 a week, kid. Cash only." He called me kid. At 26. I handed him what little money I had left. He gave me a single key and said, "Don't clog the drain." Last guy did, and it flooded the whole damn floor. That was my welcome to the city. The room had one light bulb and smelled like detergent from the laundromat upstairs. The only furniture was a mattress on the floor and a table someone left behind. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The next morning I started looking for work. No plan, just walked around asking every store with a help wanted sign. By noon I had 3 options: unloading trucks at a warehouse, washing dishes at a diner, or cleaning buses at night. I took all 3. Days blurred together. Mornings I hauled boxes. Afternoons I scrubbed plates. Nights I wiped down bus seats that smelled like spilled soda and old food. My hands cracked from the chemicals and I came home too tired to think. But the rent got paid. When I had energy I drew. I couldn't afford real supplies, so I took flattened cardboard from behind the laundromat and painted on that. Sometimes I'd find old wood panels in the alley. I mixed leftover paint from the warehouse with cheap brushes I bought at a dollar store. The apartment slowly filled with drawings. People from the street, faces I saw on the train, workers from the diner. I didn't sign them. Didn't think they were worth signing. Food was simple: cheap bread, instant noodles, black coffee. I learned every brand of ramen by price. The kettle was the only thing in that room that worked perfectly. At night, when I finally sat down, I'd scroll through my phone. My data plan barely worked underground, but it was enough to see EA's name everywhere. The voice of a new art generation, A. Marin, continuing her mother's vision. Photo shoots, interviews, all perfect lighting and soft smiles. In one clip, Dad said, "Talent runs in the family." He didn't mention me. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. It went on like that for months. Work, paint, scroll, sleep. Over and over. Some nights I'd just stare at the concrete ceiling and listen to the pipes rattle when the laundromat ran. I told myself this was temporary, but I didn't know what better looked like anymore. Then came the night that changed things. It was late, past midnight. I was sitting on the last train home, half asleep. The car was almost empty, except for a woman in scrubs sitting across from me. She looked exhausted, head tilted back, eyes closed, her phone sliding from her hand. A hospital badge hung from her pocket. She was a nurse. I pulled out my sketch pad. Habit. I started drawing her under the dim train light, her face relaxed, shadows under her eyes, hair messy from a long shift. The train rocked gently and my pencil scratched against the paper. Halfway through, I decided to record it. I balanced my phone against my backpack and hit record. Not for clout, just so I could remember what tired really looked like. The train screeched as we pulled into another stop and she woke up. She noticed me drawing, blinked a few times, then leaned forward. I froze, half expecting her to be angry. Instead, she said quietly, "Is that me?" I nodded. She looked at the page for a long time, then smiled. Small, tired, but real. "No one's ever drawn me before," she said. I tore the page from my pad and handed it to her. "It's yours," I said. "If you don't mind, I was recording while drawing. Can I post it?" She thought for a second and said, "Sure. Just don't tag me. Let it be about the drawing." I nodded. She folded the paper carefully, like it was made of glass, and got off at the next stop. When I got back to my room, I watched the clip once. It was short, maybe 40 seconds. You could hear the hum of the train, the pencil strokes, her breathing. Nothing fancy, just real. I uploaded it before sleeping, wrote one line under it, for the ones nobody notices. Then I plugged in my phone, turned off the light and lay down. The city was quiet except for the hum of the laundromat machines upstairs. I remember thinking it would probably get 2 likes, maybe from old coworkers. I fell asleep before it even finished uploading. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications stacked so fast the screen froze. The video of the nurse had exploded overnight. People were sharing it everywhere, not just liking it but writing paragraphs underneath. Stories from janitors, teachers, delivery drivers, single parents. Stuff like, "I've worked 20 years and no one's ever looked at us like this." It was overwhelming but honest. I scrolled for hours between shifts just reading what people said. By lunchtime, I had 50 messages from strangers asking if I could draw their dad, their wife, their coworkers. I didn't answer anyone. I just kept sketching during my breaks. The warehouse guys started crowding around my phone before shifts, checking how many views the video had. One of them, a big guy named Mike, came over grinning. "Ma'am, that's you, isn't it? My wife showed me that video last night. Said it made her cry. You got to keep doing that. That's real stuff." I shrugged, trying not to look proud. "Just drawing people, man." "Yeah, but you're seeing people," he said. "There's a difference." That night, I decided to make it official. I didn't want anyone connecting it to my family name. So I picked a new one. Passenger felt right. I was always on the move, always watching. The account grew fast. Every post got more attention. Hashtags started showing up. Hashtag passenger portraits, hashtag faces of work. Someone even started a subreddit for it. I kept my head down at work, but inside I felt something I hadn't in years. Like I mattered again even if no one knew my name. It didn't take long for the account to outgrow me. DMs piled up, then emails, then interview requests I ignored. One night after a shift, I was scrolling when I saw a familiar name trending, the Marin Legacy Gala. My stomach dropped. I opened the link. There was Ia smiling beside a painting I knew immediately. One of mine, an old unfinished piece from before I left home. I'd painted half of it in Mom's studio years ago. Ia had filled in the rest, changed the colors and signed her name at the bottom. Reporters circled her, cameras flashing. My dad stood beside her with his arm around her shoulder. The interviewer asked, "Is this a new collaboration between you two?" Dad chuckled, saying, "A family collaboration." "Yes, I provided the foundation." She brought the light. Foundation. That was me. I watched the clip twice, then shut my phone off. The walls of my basement felt smaller than usual. I didn't yell or throw anything. I just sat there thinking about how they always managed to take pieces of me and make them theirs. The next day I started a new drawing. A street sweeper I'd seen that morning was pushing his cart down the block, holding a little pink toy car in one hand. He kept looking at it and laughing like it was the best thing in the world. Probably something for his daughter. I sketched him right there while he worked. I called it, "The Ones Who Laugh." It wasn't sad or heavy. It was about joy surviving anyway. I posted it that night. The response was bigger than anything before. 3 days later, I came home to a small brown package on my doorstep. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting on the label. My father's assistant. My aunt must have given them the address. She was the only one who knew where I'd landed. Inside were a few things, half-used brushes, some cheap snacks, and a short note. "Glad you found a rhythm, Joe. Collectors have been responding to lighter work lately." That was it. No signature, no warmth. For a second I thought about throwing it straight in the trash. Instead, I took one of the brushes, the smallest one. The handle splintered near the top. I cleaned it up. That night I painted again. It was a portrait of a man sitting alone at a bus stop under a flickering light. Just him, his backpack, and rain sliding off the bench. I called it "Still Here." I posted it with no caption. By morning the post had exploded. Journalists started reaching out. Hashtags doubled. Some people wrote think pieces about how Passenger captures modern resilience. I didn't read most of it. I didn't want to start believing my own hype. At work, Mike showed me an article on his phone. "Ma'am, this thing's everywhere now. You're officially viral. You could quit this job if you wanted." "Not yet," I said. "I kind of like keeping my hands busy." A few nights later, my cousin on Mom's side called. We hadn't talked in months. She said she'd been at dinner with Dad and he. Apparently they were bragging about me. Not as me though. She said, "Dad told people I'd finally learned marketing. He was taking credit for the idea like he taught me to be smart about publicity." He apparently agreed, saying, "It's good she's doing something useful now." I thanked my cousin for telling me. She apologized, said she almost walked out. I laughed, not because it was funny but because I expected nothing else. They could twist it however they wanted. They could claim it, rename it, pretend they built it. I didn't correct anyone. I went back to painting. About a month after Still Here, a small online magazine ran an article about me, or about Passenger. The headline read, "The anonymous artist painting the overlooked." I didn't even know until Mike showed me during lunch. "Listen to this," he said, scrolling. "A mysterious painter capturing the quiet strength of ordinary people." The article described my work like it was a movement. It said Passenger wasn't chasing fame, just humanity. I smiled at that. Humanity was a nice word for being broke and tired. After that, people started sending money not to me but to the shelter where I drew sometimes. The staff said donations were coming from all over. "For Passenger's friends," the email said. It felt good, like something small was actually doing something. Then came the guessing games. Comment sections filled with theories. Some thought I was an older European artist reinventing herself. One said I was probably an ex-corporate exec who snapped and found peace through paint. Someone else insisted Passenger was a collective, not one person. I didn't say a word. I let them talk. Meanwhile, back home, EA's new show, The Light Between Faces, opened. I didn't go, obviously, but the reviews showed up in my feed. Most were brutal, technically brilliant but emotionally vacant. All gloss, no heartbeat. The art of someone trying to prove instead of feel. Dad, of course, had his explanation ready. He told a reporter that modern critics hate success, and that true vision is always misunderstood. Same script as always. A few days later, my aunt texted me, "I went to Ye's show. She looked pale the whole time. You could tell she's not okay." Then your dad kept talking over her like she was a spokesperson, not an artist. That stuck with me. It was always the confident one, soaking up attention like it kept her alive. Hearing that she looked emptied out felt strange, like something was off in their perfect setup. A week later, I was sketching in the shelter when my phone buzzed. A text from EA. I froze when I saw her name. We hadn't spoken since the memorial. The message was short: "Found one of your old sketchbooks. Mom kept it in her chest. I didn't know you drew me like this. Thanks for the drawing." Attached was a photo of a page I hadn't seen in years. A pencil drawing of her at maybe 10, sitting cross-legged on the porch with our dog. Underneath, I'd written, "The Bright One." I stared at the message for a long minute. My hands were shaking a little, not from anger, just surprise. I texted back, "Didn't think you'd remember that one." She didn't reply. That hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just that she'd found the sketchbook. It was that she reached out. In the photo, she traced the lines lightly. The text said, "Thanks." But it felt like something else. A quiet apology she couldn't say aloud. Days later, my aunt called again. Sales from EA's last exhibit were lower than expected. Critics weren't buying the misunderstood genius story anymore. "Your father is spiraling," she said. "He keeps comparing EA's career to Passenger's popularity. I think he knows it's you." I doubted that. Dad lived in a denial so deep he'd call me a marketing intern before he'd believe I was the artist people loved. I saved EA's photo. It reminded me of what Mom taught me. Art isn't supposed to prove worth. It's supposed to recognize it. Then came a new clip sent by Mike. "Your dad's back at it," the text read. I opened it on break, sitting behind the warehouse with my coffee. A fancy dinner, white tablecloths, chandeliers, waiters and gloves. Caption, "The Marin Family Donor Gala." There they were again. Dad at the head of the table, smiling like a man running for office. It beside him, in a dress that looked uncomfortable, her smile thinner than usual. Around them, 2 or 3 dozen guests raising glasses. Halfway through, a silver-haired guest stood for a toast. "There's another artist trending lately," he said. "Passenger, right? The anonymous one. Her stuff hits hard. Feels like real life, not marketing." Dad's smile twitched. He chuckled politely. "She paints pity. We paint legacy." People laughed, but it sounded forced. Then Dad turned to Ye, still smiling, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Show them you can do that raw emotional thing. They love sadness these days." The room went quiet for a beat. Someone changed the subject, but I saw Ye's eyes flicker, a small crack in the performance. A few days later, Ye released a new painting online. Big canvas, muted colors, dramatic lighting. You could tell she was trying to copy the emotion from my work without understanding why it worked. She painted all night, my aunt said. When it was done, it looked perfect, balanced, clean. But when you looked closer, it felt empty. Something built to be admired, not felt. Critics noticed. Pretty but hollow. One wrote, My aunt texted mid-afternoon. She cried backstage. Then your father told people she was just tired, but she was shaking. That hit harder than I expected. I could picture her in a back room, makeup smudged, listening to Dad explain why it wasn't his fault. I didn't respond. What was there to say? A couple of months passed. One evening my aunt called in a whisper. The housekeeper who'd worked with Mom for years had given EA a letter. One Mom had written before she got too sick. It was addressed to me, but Dad had hidden it. I found out about it after that failed exhibit. The housekeeper slipped it to her, saying, "Your mother wanted him to have this." I read it alone in the studio, crying. The letter wasn't long. Mom wrote that she worried Dad's pride would bury quiet hearts like yours. She told me to keep painting what was real even if no one looked. At the end she wrote, "If the world forgets her, remind them who she is." According to my aunt, E folded the letter and put it in her bag. The next morning, Dad found her reading it. He tore it in half, calling Mom soft. It didn't say a word. She left the room. Later she taped it back together. "She's not as cold as you think," my aunt said softly. "She's just stuck." That sentence stayed with me. It didn't make what EA had done okay, but it made sense. She wasn't just spoiled. She was trapped in Dad's world, and maybe finally she could see the bars. Then the announcement hit. The Art of the Marin Legacy. Dad's big comeback. Sponsored ads. Local radio. A tagline about a family's unbroken vision. Opening night photos appeared. Half the seats were empty. 2 days later, a video surfaced of the Q&A. A journalist asked, "Do you think passenger represents what the Marin name used to mean? The emotional connection your family was once known for?" Dad froze, then smiled too wide. "Passenger?" He laughed dry and hard. "She's a beggar with a brush. A fraud who sells misery to sentimental fools." Silence. The clip cut, but it was enough. Sponsors pulled out. A main investor dropped. Artists withdrew from showing under the Marin brand. Mike shoved his phone at me at lunch, grinning. "He's trending, but not in a good way." I watched the clip again. Dad, red-faced, shouting at a room that had already stopped listening. Mike asked if I was okay. "Yeah," I said, and I was. I went home, sat in my basement surrounded by cardboard paintings, and kept drawing. By the end of the month, the gallery shuttered. Temporary restructuring, the statement said. Everyone knew what it meant. My cousin said the house was a war zone. Ye stopped showing up. She moved her things out one night without telling anyone. Dad locked himself in his office and only came out to shout. He blamed her for ruining everything. She told him he'd been ruining it for years. I didn't reach out. I figured if she wanted space, she'd take it. But the thought of her stuck in that house stayed with me. One night, I opened the drawer with Dad's old train ticket, the one he'd handed me like a joke. I bought a physical ticket to my city. Same line, same direction, even the same car number if I could get it. I slipped it into an envelope and wrote her name on the front. No note, no explanation. I dropped it in the mail the next morning and went to work in the rain. The same rust and concrete smell from the day I arrived. For once, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a door. The train yard was quiet most days, except for the low hum of engines in the distance and the occasional clang of metal when the wind hit something loose. I rented an old rail car near the end of the line and turned it into a small art room. The locals called it the passenger line. It wasn't much. The floor was still rusted in places. The roof leaked when it rained, but it worked. I strung up cheap lights, patched the holes, and lined the walls with cardboard panels for anyone to paint on. The place always smelled like a mix of paint, metal, and wet air. Kids from nearby apartments started showing up after school. Factory workers came on weekends, still in uniform. A few older folks just sat and watched, sometimes bringing coffee or leftover brushes. We painted whatever they wanted. Portraits, skylines, faces that meant something to them. Nobody judged anything here. I didn't charge anyone. I just kept the doors open. Made sure there was always coffee and a box of cheap supplies. One afternoon, I was cleaning brushes near the doorway when I saw a figure walking down the tracks. For a second, I didn't recognize her. The hair was shorter, the clothes plain, but then she looked up and I knew it was E. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but like she'd finally dropped the act. She stopped a few feet from the door and said, "Hi." "Hey," I said back. She stepped inside and looked around slowly. "This is yours." "Yeah." We sat on opposite sides of the table. Neither of us spoke for a while, just the sound of trains rumbling somewhere far off. Then she spoke softly. "I read Mom's letter." I nodded. "I know." She looked surprised. "How?" "Aunt told me," I said. "Said Dad tore it up." She nodded once, her eyes on the floor. I taped it back together. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketchbook. When she opened it, I saw pages filled with portraits, rough, quick sketches of strangers. A woman holding a baby at a station. A man asleep against a window. A kid staring out a train door. "These are from the trains," she said quietly. "On my way here." The drawings weren't perfect. Some lines were off, the shading uneven, but they were alive. For the first time, her work didn't look like it was trying to be impressive. It just felt real. I flipped through them slowly. "They're good," I said. "You stopped trying to prove something." She smiled faintly. "I stopped trying to impress him." We didn't talk about Dad after that. There wasn't much left to say. I handed her a brush and pointed to a blank section of wall. "You want to paint?" She hesitated, then nodded. We painted side by side. No plan, no theme, just colors, faces, movement, whatever came out. A few kids stopped to watch us. None of them realized who she was, and that felt right. Over the next few weeks, she kept coming back. Sometimes she helped the kids paint. Sometimes she just cleaned or made coffee. She didn't post anything online, didn't mention her name. She didn't have to. The community started treating her like she'd always been there. One man welded a small sign and hung it above the door. The passenger line, open hands, open walls. People brought food, helped patch leaks, even painted the outside of the car. It started to feel like a home, not for me but for everyone who needed one. Then one morning she told me she was leaving. "I want to start another car like this," she said. "There's an old freight yard near the coast. The owner said I can use one." I nodded. "You'll make it work." She smiled. "You sound like Mom." Before she left, I took the old train ticket from my drawer and set it between us. She turned it in her fingers, studying it for a long time. Then she stood on a chair and taped it to the wall near the door. The same ticket Dad had given me years ago. Next to it, she wrote a small note in pencil, "Keep going. Someone's still waiting to be seen." She hugged me once, quick, quiet, no words, then walked down the tracks, the morning light spilling across the rails. After she disappeared around the curve, I stood there for a long time, staring at the ticket. The paper was almost golden now from age, but it finally meant something good. That night, after locking up, I sat by the door and listened to the trains pass in the distance. The air smelled like paint and rain again. A week later, one of the regulars, an older man named Ray, showed me a photo on his phone. "You see this?" he said. "There's a new art car 2 states over. Looks just like yours." He zoomed in on the image. The rail car was painted ocean blue with the same words on the door. The passenger line, just hand-lettered in a different style. Ray chuckled. "Guess your sister's got one running too, huh?" I smiled. "Yeah, she didn't have to tell me." When everyone left, I turned off the lights and looked up at the wall. The train ticket hung there under a flickering bulb, right beside my first drawing, the nurse asleep on the train. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I locked the door, slipped the key into my pocket, and said softly to myself, I stopped trying to matter to people who already decided I didn't. That was when life finally started feeling like mine. Have you ever felt like you had to disappear to truly find yourself, or for others to finally see you? What did it take for you to step out of someone else's shadow? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.